Hello, this is Ken Spriggs with part 3 of my fantastic Voyage Tale of Two Proteai. This is actually the finale of the 8-inch version of the model. I'm going to continue this build series where I will return back to the 4-inch version, which is part of the same build series. But this is the finale of this particular one. So in this video, I will be finishing up the Proteus itself, the figures, and the base. Let's take a look. So I completed the landing legs for the Proteus, and I used these 5 different sizes of aluminum tube. And the way I chose them is the biggest one that would fit over the little nub on the bottom of the model, and then successively smaller ones that would fit comfortably inside of the other ones, so that they would slide in perfectly and not be too loose. So I went through and I cut out, a bunch of little pieces. And then once I got the size right, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it from the scenes from the film, and you'll see the front ones, this is a little bit angled because they're at a slight angle. Not a big angle, it's just a little bit coming down in the front. The back one seems like it's straight, and the back one is actually shorter because obviously you have them at a different height. So you have this extra ledge here, which takes up more space. And then these are just going to fit right over top of these existing bumps. I'm just going to clean up around the edge and just leave them in place as a nice thing to center it on. And then also they're hollow, so one of them, possibly the back one, I'm going to have my wiring for my lights coming down through into the base. And I'll come up with something for the little flat pads, because the idea is that these bumps actually are the little feet for them, and they just extend down, and then that would be the little rounded boot at the bottom that it lands on. Now, of course, these couldn't actually exist inside the sub, because if you came straight up from this one, it would come right through the floor of the lab. And there's just literally not enough space in there to accommodate all these sections, even if they're telescoping together. Same with here. They would come right up into the main area. But it's a clever idea. From what I was reading, I believe they had 5 different models, or it's believed to have 5 different models, including the little 1.5-inch one, a really big 5-foot one, which was the Hero one. And it had the actual legs which extended. So when we see that happening in the film, that's the model that they're using. And we see that I believe only twice, once in the lungs when they're going out to get air, and once in the inner ear that I'll be making. So, but this will be extended, and so of course I'll have the Proteus attached onto the base, but there's a nice solid platform for it. I'll just have to drill a hole through and have that coming through for the lighting. So so these are ready to go. So what I have to do now is start cleaning up the bottom of the ship. I have the top pretty good and a coat of primer on it. I'm just going to be doing a little bit of cleaning up and filling some spots, and then getting a final smooth sanding on that. Let me show you that real quick. All right, so not looking too bad. And then what I actually did was, this is the second bubble, because I have 2 of these. This was the first one, and it had some errors that I worked with Stephen on, and he fixed them and he reprinted it. There was also a few things, like some of the front grills were kind of filled in with resin. They weren't as clean as they should have been. But this was the first one, so I can use that in some of the parts from it. So I took the original dome and I just put some styrene around it, and then I temporarily put it down onto this one, and I have that little tube in there holding it in place. Because what I want to do is I want to keep the resin pretty clean so that I'm not trying to glue on to paint, especially a more shiny or satiny paint, which is what this will end up being, the white. So that'll stay on until all that's done. This is all painted white. And then I'll do the bottom, paint that one white, and then I'll put them together and clean up the seams and that kind of thing. So not too bad. A few little areas that I have to clean up a bit that I already passed a bit right there. This front section, there are a few little divots. So I'll be doing some sanding. If the sanding doesn't fill it in and more primer, then I'll end up putting in some more of the Bondo. Sorry, which is what I did originally, fill some holes, but not looking too bad. And then you have the bottom. You're only going to see a part of that bottom, so the inner part is going to be covered by the outer part of the ship. And also the way they fit together, there's going to be a gap down here that I'm going to have to fill in. Let me show you on this one here. Yeah, it is a pretty sizable gap right there. That I'm going to have to fill in. I'm not going to be quite as worried about the bottom. This one's pretty messed up too, but I don't think the other one is quite that bad. Let me see. No, not as bad. A little bit. But the bottom you're not going to see as much. But I do have to clean it up. Okay. But the landing legs are going good. So once I get this part cleaned up, what I'll probably end up doing is gluing them on and painting them when I paint the bottom. That way they'll be all attached and have a nice solid connection, because they are holding up a pretty good weight. This model has a little bit of heft to it since it's a 3D printed resin. So, okay. All right, so one more modification that I did is the grills on the front are not accurate. And not just that little grate behind it, but the actual number of those bars that go across. There's only 3, there's not 4. So that wasn't accurate. Let me show you the Proteus model. So here's the Proteus. There's only 3 spanning across. What they're for, I have no idea. It's kind of weird because they're so far apart. They don't prevent anything from going in. They didn't even prevent the reticular fibers from entering in. I'm assuming there's something else behind it, but we don't actually see that. It's just dark. But anyway, there's only 3. So what I did was I used my Sonic Saber and I tested it first on this first one. And it worked out fine. You can see that one there. I already painted it black just to kind of test it. So what I did was when I cut it out, there was a lot of open area and material back there. So I had to cut a lot away. And then I used some epoxy sculpt and I molded it into there, shaped it to give it kind of a pocket, and then let it harden overnight. And so then I used some styrene strip, one's rectangular stock, one is square stock. And I just glued the thinner one on top of it in the center to give it that look like it's that bar with some detail, because as you can see, it's not just a one piece, it's kind of a multi-piece bar. And then what I did was, when this dried, you can see the epoxy sculpt in there, I went ahead and glued these on. I think those turned out pretty cool. They were a bit tricky because they're spaced in the middle and centered, but they're not centered to the edge. So there's a bigger edge on either side than there is between the actual bars, which you can see on the Mobius is the same way. And it's a little harder to tell too because of the scale between them, but I'm happy with how that turned out. So I have those glued on with CA glue. So what I'm going to end up doing, I was kind of figuring out how I'm going to paint this, because obviously the whole ship has to be painted, primed and painted with white, and then black in those inner parts, and then dark gray on the little bars. So I figured I want to get those glued onto the resin itself so it's a better hold. I didn't want to glue into paint. So I did a lot of cleanup on this. So I'll probably get a good coat of primer on it, see what other things I have to fix up, and then get the whole thing painted with the white. And then I'll go back in and use a brush to get in between the bars and paint the black behind it, and then paint the dark gray over the bars last of all. And that'll be fine, because all of that will go over the white without any kind of problem. So, okay, but much happier with that look on the front grills. Those are more accurate, and I think that's really going to look cool. It's one of the defining features of it, that you see the black and the gray bars on the front of the ship when it's, you know, even in profile. So, okay. All right, so I started 3D printing some figures, and I started with the pilot. And this pose doesn't work, obviously, with the seated position, because his legs are straight out on the pedals. And I made 3 different sizes, so I ended up with a small one, which works. Now, what I had to end up doing, and again, no criticism of the detail that he put into this kit. It's amazing. It is quite amazing. But I was running into a problem that once I did the sanding and the fitting so that the top of the ship goes over the bottom of the ship, I was running into a problem where the little pilot seat and all the different parts were just a little bit off. Just a little bit off. And sometimes when you sand certain things, you sacrifice this for that or whatever. And it's always that way with a resin model and that kind of thing. So, but not a big deal. But fortunately, so I had the original one that I had gotten, and he had made some modifications to, and then reprinted it and sent me the new version. So I have the original one, which I'm able to use some parts from, which works out good in my situation. So what I did was it was a lot of different mechanisms on this little platform. So on the original one, I just cut the whole piece off, and I used a method where, if you've ever done this with 2 models, the part you need, you cut further around than you need to protect the part, because you're not going to worry about the rest of this. I don't need this whole interior. But when it came to the part I'm replacing, I had to cut around some parts of it, and then more carefully use my Dremel and a sanding wheel to sand it flat, so that I didn't hurt any of the other part of the ship. And then that way I get a clean surface. As you can see how flat it is, in order to attach the replacement part. But I didn't want to damage any of those other pieces sticking up. So I got that to where I needed it to be. And also it's nice because I have the whole pilot section as a separate little assembly. So I took the smallest of the figures I printed and I cut off his arms and his legs at the knees, and I repositioned him to be in the right position. His feet don't quite fit the pedals, but I don't care. You're not going to see them. All you're going to see is that. And mostly what you're going to see is him in the top, and see his arms and him in the chair. So what I can end up doing, of course, is painting this before I glue it in place, and then I don't have to worry about trying to paint the different things when it's apart. Let me put him on there and I'll show you how that's going to look. Okay. I also used my Sonic Saber from Frozen, which worked well to clean up some parts, remove some of the supports that were still on it, and also cut the figures so that I could reposition the arms and the legs. But that's how he's going to look in the cockpit. It's going to be pretty cool. And then I played with it with the lit dome on top that I'd already made before, so I could make sure that he was going to be positioned right and you could see him in the bubble. So let me try to put that together and show you how that's going to look. I won't put the lights on, but just with the bubble. Actually, it wasn't really a problem to put the lights on, but you can see how I left the lights on the inside so that it would light up the pilot, which is cool. That way you can see him inside there. And then of course I have the dome. And this isn't in place, of course, so I'm just holding it in place. Okay, there we go. Very, very cool. And once I get that painted, so obviously the little control ring is like a gunmetal, I believe. The seat is black. I think the platform is red, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and look. He's white, the white outfit, of course. Brown hair. In this particular scene, that's the regular pilot. It's not Dr. Michaels. That happens later with the brain, but very, very cool. All right. All right, so the pilot figure was a separate figure that I got. All of these I got on cults3d.com. Really good site. They have a lot of different variety of things. The rest of these I got from one set. And there were two other ones I got, but they didn't really work out to be what I wanted them to be. So I'm playing with the sizes. Each of these I made a small, medium, and large. And as I said, with the pilot, I ended up using the smallest version. Here's the largest, here's the medium. I used the smallest version of him to fit inside the sub because of all the controls and everything. So, actually, let me take that back. Was it the medium? No, it was the smallest. Okay. Now the problem is, I'm not real crazy about the smaller versions of the scuba gear people. Although these are kind of relative sizes. This set all came together so I could make a percentage of the size it came in. he was different, so I just had to kind of match him up, but he was in a seated position. So it was hard to really come up with an accurate size anyway. So what I ended up figuring out is either the medium or the large size of these Scuba figures, and I have 3. I have 2 that I got for Cora. Very nice sculpts, by the way. They're not supposed to be Cora. They're just scuba divers. There were 2 female and there were several male, but very cool. This one has a tank on the back, and the tank is wrong, by the way. Their tank is a small one at the bottom, sideways, with a black pack that I'll put on top of them, which I'll fashion on my own. And then we have this one, which I really like. And this one, she doesn't have a pack on the back, but they did a great job on her body. Well, let me rephrase that. Her body looks very much like the body shape of Raquel Welch in the film. So I really like this pose, and she's reaching out, which is a cool pose. So I can have her over here pulling out some reticular fibers from the top of this grill here, coming out to the side. Right before the scissors were dropped and she goes flying into the fibers. And then I have 2 other ones. So I have this one, which I'm going to use for Dr. Grant, or not Dr. Grant, or Mr. Grant, which I think is kind of cool. And he's over on this side of it, and this one's reaching forward. This actually had a little spear gun in his right hand, which you can still see a part of, which I just cut off. And that'll make a nice connect point for him to be attached to the front grille of the sub. And then Dr. Michaels, actually, let me keep these together. That's a small one, let's get rid of that. Dr. Michaels, this original figure, this is the original pose. And both his arms were behind him. So I already did a test on this one where I cut his arm off and I repositioned it to be reaching forward. So he'll be reaching over on this side of the sub, and same thing, pulling off reticular fibers. Now, the tricky part is I really like this print. It came out really nice. Unfortunately, this is the large one. The medium one didn't come out as nice, and the leg didn't print. So I could reposition this and do it again. The medium is a little more seemingly in scale with the pilot, as opposed to the larger one, which doesn't look that way. So I will try another print. These 2 turned out fine with either of those. This particular one, I cut off the tank because I have to refashion a new one. And of course, I'd have to cut the arm off and redo that. Same with this one. I cut off the arm. Not the arm, the tank. And the thing is too, sorry for the focus, but these are so small. The smaller you make them, the less of the detail really shows up. And they're a pretty simple paint. It's just, they're all white. They have a black belt around them. They have black shoulder straps. There's a little black pouch on the back with a yellow tank. And then a little bit more detail for the face mask, but we'll work on that. So, okay. So it's not a bad start, but let me go ahead and do another print. See if I can get a better print on a medium-sized Cora to go more in scale with the pilot. All right, so I got the painting attached onto the styrene of the base, hugged around the corners. And what I used was this matte adhesive, Wooden Scenics. And what I like about this is that you coat the back of both parts and you let it totally dry. And then it remains tacky, so it basically makes them self-adhesive. So that way you can just stick them down and press them into place. I thought it'd be a little bit easier than trying to put some glue down, putting on, waiting it to dry. Because this sticks like right away. As soon as you put the two parts together, you have to be cautious, but they do kind of stick right away. So I put a couple of coats on both of them just to make sure. I did a test at first on one of my other canvas paintings that I did. And it seemed to be working. I did have to use some clamps to hold down the corners of the painting onto a piece of cardboard because it started to curl up. And then it seemed one of the side effects of that is to shrink the painting a little bit. Didn't seem to damage it in any way, but as you can see, this edge over here isn't quite lined up. And at the bottom, I knew it was going to be a little bit of an edge, but I thought it would be covered by this when I just laid the painting on, but it's a lot bigger. In addition, it's kind of hard to tell when you're just laying it on and it's not adhered. So a little bit of that was just, it's hard to tell how big this needed to be. But not a problem. I needed to cover the edges up here anyway. This edge is a lot closer, but I'm putting some material over the edges anyway to cover those. So I'll just put a little more on this side. Now for down here, it's a sizable piece. It's about 3/4 of an inch. So what I decided to do, I don't want to cover Augie's signature. When I painted it, I was careful not to paint over that. But I took a piece of wood, which is 3/4 thick, and I cut it on my bandsaw so that I get this angle. Not quite sure what that is. But what that does is it goes in like this, and it'll cover that gap. And then this piece will go on top of that and be angled a little bit. And it actually looks even cooler. Gives it a little more organic look to it. Like the shelf's coming down and it's going off on another angle on it. So what I'm going to do now is get this glued down onto the base. And then once that's dry, I can go ahead and glue this onto the wood here. And then it'll be lined up again the way it's supposed to be. But I really like how it turned out. I think it looks really cool. There are some uneven surfaces, and that's fine because I guess the styrene, because I nailed it down in places, when you feel it, there's obviously some different, not exactly flat or straight, which is fine because that's exactly what this would be. And it makes it definitely more of an organic thing. And you can see, I really like that I put the color shifting paint. So again, you can see when you look at it from different angles, it changes the look of the various cells and kind of gives you that idea that there's something a little more going on with them. And I think it kind of makes up for the fact that obviously in the film they've got really bright colors because of the light that was shining down on the set. But in this case, I'm getting some shiny appearance from it. So, all right, looking good. All right, so quite a bit more of 3D printing. I believe I have honed in the 3 figures that I want to use, which is going to be these ones here. So I'm going to have this little one for Grant. And his hand's also reaching out so he can be supported in as if he's pulling on some of the reticular fibers out of the intakes. This one for Cora. Come on. Very cool little figure. And again, none of these are designed to be from Fantastic Voyage. They're just Scuba figures. Some men and women came into a set from Cult 3D.com. But this one's pretty cool. She's pretty tiny too. She's also reaching out. So I'm going to have her pulling on some reticular fibers. What I kind of thought the best way to do this would be to attach a thin rod to like her arm, and then have a little hole drilled into the part of the sub where she's reaching into by the intake, and then put a little bit of cotton around it, make it look like fibers, like she's pulling them out. And then I can put her in or remove her from it, so I don't have to have her dangling from the sub when I transport it and maybe get damaged. So, sorry. The same with the other two. And then the last one is this one here for Dr. Michaels. This one kind of looks like he's bald anyways. So it's kind of cool. What's funny is if you look on the film, the men don't wear any kind of a cap over their head. Only Cora does. And I'm assuming because they're not really in water and they don't want her hair to be all wet because it's up in that big poofy beehive or whatever you would call it back there in the 60s. The men, they actually had their hair slicked back a bit, which is kind of funny. Even when they're outside of the sub, their hair is just slicked back, like it's not flowing or anything, because they're not really in any kind of liquid. They're just on cables. The Dr. Michaels, I still have to position his arm, cut off one of his arms like I did on this one. No, that's a Cora one, I'm sorry. Yeah, these ones ended up being a little too large for scale with the pilot. This one here. So I cut the arm off and I have it like he's reaching in. So I'll do the same thing on the smaller one. So I think these three right here, and I have to clean them up, of course. And I moved the tanks from the backs of the men. I have to fashion up some tiny little tanks the way they look in the film. And then little face masks as well. But other than that, a little bit more cleanup. I have to clean up the feet because they don't have flippers on. And then those will be ready to go. Another thing that I did was I remembered that I actually have a 3D print of the Proteus from Gambody.com that I bought about a year or so ago. I haven't really printed it out. It comes in several parts, and even the body's in several parts. So I ended up not really doing it, but I figured I could use parts from it for other subs like this, which I really can. So the kit itself came with this crude hatch design on the top, and also that little hexagonal area where you would have the snorkel. And then the initial one didn't have a hatch at the bottom. It just had the one on the top. So he fixed that. But even so, like, this hatch isn't the right roundness. It also doesn't have any kind of hinges or anything holding it on. So I had remembered I had that and thought, oh, I can just go print some hatches from there. And sure enough, I did. So these are really cool. Get these little hatches. And they have a little more accurate, little thinner, little opening ring at the top. They're just flat on the bottom. They don't have anything in between these, which would be for the post that they ride on, like a hinge, so I just made some out of styrene. And then they have these little rings that go underneath them. And I'm assuming on the model inside or from Gambody, this would be open, so this would go on top of that. This goes on there, and then I'm going to glue these on here with the little flat part sticking down like it's attached to the deck. In addition, they have this little teeny part for the snorkel, which is pretty cool. And so what I ended up doing, which I thought was just easier, well, first of all, on the bottom, I just cut off. I just sanded flat where the other hatch was. And I'm just going to glue the hatch assembly down there. On the top, I did the same, but I also went ahead and sanded off a part of the little snorkel area because I can just easily replace it with a little more accurate one that has the little snorkel part in it. Let me show you. All right, here we go. So they're not permanently glued down, but I have the hatch, and the top hatch is sort of angled back a little bit. And then you have the snorkel part, and there's only the slightest little bit of a seam there at the back, which I could even sand down a bit once I get it glued in place. I still have to come up with something clear to go around that snorkel. Maybe like a clear straw or something. I was trying to get behind it so I could get it to focus. Okay. But that'll be painted red. And of course the hatches will be yellow on top of it. So what I'll probably do is simply paint the sub first, then paint the hatches separately and put them down there. I'm going to glue the snorkel on first though, so that'll be a part of the rest of the sub that I paint. One other thing that I printed off is the one for the bottom, are these little round nubs. These are the feet for the landing gear. So they're the little circles that you see, little bumps on the bottom before they pull out and extend down. So these get glued on to the bottom of the extended feet that I have. And the one in the back, I will drill a hole through the center so that the wiring can go down through into the diorama. So, all right. So hopefully I'm done with my modifications. I always do this. I'm somewhat of a perfectionist when it comes to these things. And again, no slights to this kit. The kit's really, really good. I'm not looking to make any modifications on the interior, just to clean it up a bit and get it painted, because you're only going to see what you see through the windows. So I think I'm just about ready to go ahead and get some more masking off here, and then start getting a white coat on the sub itself. I do want to glue the foot pads on the bottom of this first, because those are going to be primed and painted white as well. And then at the end I'll glue I think I'm just going to leave the hatches off, just because those would be easier to glue on at the end and easier to paint yellow than trying to airbrush them or mask them off or whatever kind of thing. But everything else I'm going to put in place and have that ready to go. All right. All right, and sorry for the rushing through and not stopping and showing some progress and that sort of thing, but down to the wire, just finishing up this model in time for Wonderfest. So took a lot of stills, but didn't have time to do the video and finish it up at the end. But let me go ahead and show you the figures. Very happy with how they turned out. So here is Dr. Michaels. You can see I have the little backpack that I painted black, the little yellow scuba tank. The tank itself is just a thin piece of styrene that I cut to length and rounded off the edges with a file. The backpack and the face mask I made out of epoxy sculpt, and the little bit of reticular fiber is made with cotton that I put over the wire and part of the hand. Most of this is going to be inside of the grill that you're not going to see. You're just going to see him from this position. And because this is Dr. Michaels, his head is bald. Just did a flesh tone. Some silver on the front of the, let me get that a little bit closer. Very small and delicate. Some silver on the front of the face mask. And then once it was all dry, I just took some, I left the part where his eyes would be unpainted, and I just put some 5-minute epoxy over it to give it that clear look. And it's not designed to be scrutinized from the front or his face. You're just going to see it from the back, just like that. And so you're going to get the view. And here's Grant. Same thing. There's his backpack. And on the side, I put that little bit of rope. They had a little rope coil on the side of them, so I just fashioned that out of epoxy sculpt. He has hair, so I just painted that brown. His mask. And some of the figures, like Grant, he had already the straps going around him, and they all kind of had a belt. So I put that on. Okay. Very cool. And then, of course, Cora, or Raquel Welch. Very cool sculpt. A little bit more of the reticular fibers on her because she's up on top of the sub, sticking into the intake for the engine. Very happy with how those turned out. Really, really cool. All right, so they're ready to go. Right now, I just have to finish up getting the sub painted. I already have it primered and sanded to where I need it to be. Added on the parts that I needed to. I just have to paint the entry hatches. Get those put onto it. And I did paint the inside. I didn't show a lot of images of it because it's not really going to be seen. And pretty much I just painted the floor is like an olive drab or olive green. The walls are light gray, and then use some black for the seats, and a little bit of silver accents here and there, some gunmetal for the ring around the cockpit or the little pilot seat. So okay, and the pilot is just white with some flesh on there. So let me go ahead and show you some stills from the sub, and then we'll show you the sub painted and put together. All right, and here is the finished Proteus. So as I showed in the previous stills, I made some decals. I just found an image of the decal sheet from the Mobius model and made it different sizes, printed it out in black and white and tested it on the size until I got what I wanted. And then I printed it on decal paper and put it down on the sub. So you got the little foot pads, you got the little name of the sub, a little bit of background there that it was hard to get rid of. I did not actually decide to go with any kind of a gloss coat on this at all. This is just a flat white. It is very smooth though. And after I put the primer on and sanded it nice and smooth, I put a couple of coats of the flat white from Krylon on it, and just like the flat black that I often use for light blocking, it has a satiny kind of a look to it. It's not quite flat. You can see it's a little bit shiny. So I figured that would be the best way to go. And I didn't want to fuss with the decals. I did put some Walthers Solvaset over them, which seemed to settle them down just fine. I have glued on the hatch on the top, the little snorkel, and I just used a piece of clear, well, frosted shrink tube that I cut very, very short and just glued that down inside of it. Nice and cool. Gives it a little bit of color. And then I got the windows put in. Basically, I took some tape and I taped over the inside of it, and then I went over the outside before I painted it with a marker to outline the windows. I cut it out, and then I used it as kind of a template to cut out the different sections. And in the end, I just glued them on one at a time, lightly putting on some CA glue. There was enough overlap that I could avoid getting some on the window itself. And then made sure that they lined up, and then right in between where these little bars were, I could go over the inside of those with some CA glue as well, which I just used to glue it on. I glued the bubble on using some canopy glue. I thought that would work fine because it wasn't holding much of a weight. And then the pilot, one other thing I did, which I showed a still of, see if you can see it here, is from Gambody, I 3D printed the headset behind him. You can see it there over his head. Got the right size, very tiny and very fragile. Let me show you, because there's my fingers. And once this was all done and all painted and he was in place, I went ahead and glued that on the back and gently put it around his head so I wouldn't run into a problem with it breaking, because it was so delicate. But I think that's really cool. It's amazing what you can 3D print sometimes and how small they are. But you can see inside there's the black seats. You've got the green. Put a little blue in there, but like I said, that little teeny thin strip, that's supposed to be where they're showing like the maps inside the body, but it's out of whack with the size. So I'm not all that worried about it. I did put a little chip, cool white SMD in the front chip, and I put some clear yellow over it to make it more of a warm white. Ran the wire along the side of the inside interior so you wouldn't see it. Lined it up with the, got it into the back section. And then I took it out. Well, I attached it all together with the wires. And then underneath I have just one set of red and black wires coming out of the bottom. And there's a hole in the base that I'll show you here shortly that goes down into it. There's the bottom hatch. Now for the front, I drilled some holes into the bottom pads, and I just glued in some thick rod. And then I lined it all up on the base where I wanted to put the sub. And so the wires just go down through into the base, and then these two little rods go down into two holes that line up for them, and it holds it in place nicely so it's not going anywhere. But I can remove it for shipping to Wonderfest, so that was the important part. I'm out of the little connects that I get from Evan Designs. Couldn't find any, so basically just left the wires loose. I'm going to snip them and attach them into the wiring underneath, and I'll show you that here shortly. All right. All right, so there it is, put onto the base. And as you can see, when the wires go down through the back, it's flush. When the two rods go into the base and the painting, those are also flush, so you don't see any of that coming through. Make sure the sub from the front. And obviously I got the little fiber section glued onto place, and it's angled like I showed. And then what I finished up was I went over the sides of this and up around the edges, around the top, over the top, down the other edge with some Milliput. Only because my my epoxy sculpt was starting to dry up some of it. I have to pick up some more at Wonderfest, but that worked just fine. I went and bought some of that from Hobby Lobby. I prefer the epoxy sculpt, but Milliput worked just fine. And then I went back over after it hardened and painted it with a navy to kind of blend in with the rest of the base. So you're not gonna see that. It's not gonna stand out, but it covers any of the gaps from the painting. And then we have the side view. And then we have the other side view. Okay, very cool. So let me go ahead and turn it around and I'll show you what I did in the back and then the wiring setup. All right, so I painted the back of it blue. Used a big brush and some of the blue craft paint that I had just to give it a bit of a finished look, so it wasn't just bare wood. Oh, and I got a piece of wood, obviously, and glued it down and nailed it down in a few spots going down to the back. Cut a big section out of it, so I have plenty of room to get in there and get to the battery and the wires. You can see the two wires in the back there coming down. That's coming from the back leg of the sub. So these two little blue connectors, I soldered them onto this wire. And I'm using a remote control, primarily because I want to be able to dim the lights. I think they're just a little too bright, so I'd rather have them dimmed so that I can do that. And the way it works is with this little controller, you have an on and off, and then you have a dim and a bright. It's really cool. You must have some built-in resistors in this little circuit board here that lets it do that. So what you have is you have the LEDs of the lights coming into this side, and this side also has the little sensor. There's the sensor, remote control, which has a pretty good range. Then you have two wires coming out of the side, the other side, the black and red, and those go to your power supply. So I just have those wired into the switched wires for the battery housing. It's just two AA batteries. And I have that just Velcroed down inside of there so I can remove it and I can change the batteries when I need to. So now all of this is ready to go. It doesn't have to be glued in or taped in. I can just kind of tuck it in there. Everything is has has a shrink tube around it, so I'm not going to have any problems with anything touching and shorting out. All right, so I have everything ready to go. Let me turn the sub around. Well, before I do that, let me turn the base around, and I'll get the figures attached on, and then we'll do the final reveal with the lights. All right, and there is the sub on the base. Looking pretty sweet. Sorry. There are the figures. So what I discovered, the best way to put them in there in order to have them removable, and I'm back from Wonderfest already, and I took this there, and I didn't want to glue them in ahead of time because I just can imagine their arms breaking off in transit. So I used some Elmer's glue, a little bit, dabbed it on there, stick it in, let it set up, and then it holds them in nicely. And then when I brought it back home, I was able to easily pull them back out and not do any damage, and then glue them back in again. So, okay. So let me go ahead and use the remote and turn on the lights. There we go. All right. So it's not as bright in real life, but let me show you. So I have the remote. I can make it brighter. Too bright, obviously. I can make it dimmer. Okay. So actually that looks good on the camera, but in real life it's a little too dim. But that's what I like about the remote control, is that I can adjust the brightness of the light. So let's zoom in here a little bit. There's our pilot in the dome. We have the control ring around him. Okay. Kind of move around to this side here. So we have Mr. Grant reaching in and cleaning out some of the reticular fibers. Dr. Michaels over to the right side. And then we have Cora over here pulling some out of the engine intake. And I have kind of discovered that she is about the right size if she were to fall down here and go between these filaments, these fibers, and get stuck. I'll take a look over top. All right, pretty cool. Really happy with that. Really happy with how the painting turned out from Augie, and the gradient, but also the color shifting paints as well. So if we move kind of over to the side, it looks more of a single color. When we look at it straight on, we see some gradient, and then the same way when we come on over here. Okay, but very cool. I like my little fiber bundles down here too. I think they turned out pretty cool. And of course my figures are pretty awesome for the sub. All right. All right, so really happy with how this turned out. Really like how the base turned out. Thanks again to Augie Gonzalez for his fantastic painting skills. Really happy to be working on that, and to actually having us collaborating on this painting with the colors and trying to achieve the final result, which I think turned out really great with the color shifting paints and the other inks and that kind of thing. Same with the Proteus. So I will be working at some point here. I have returned from Wonderfest, so I'm going to have a separate video about Wonderfest. But I wanted to finish up getting the last two parts of this build up. And then, as I stated earlier, I'm going to continue this series, and I'll be working on the 4-inch version, which I've already started and have work on, and working on the diorama for that one as well. I don't know if that'll be my next video or not, but it will be videos coming down the road. So, okay. Thank you to all my new subscribers. Thank you to all the subscribers that came up to Wonderfest and talked to me, and we talked about my models and those kind of things. I always love when that happens. And, you know, never feel like I'm not going to be open to that. I'm always happy to talk to anybody about my models, and to talk to people that subscribe to my channel. That's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this so that people can not just look at what I'm doing, but take different techniques and different things, and, you know, feel free to use them in your models. I encourage that. That's why I do it. It's the whole purpose of this YouTube channel. So, all right. So thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.